Welcome back to Food for Therapy. I'm here with the lovely Doctor Belinda Mackie, psychoanalyst, and our topic for this episode of Season 2 has been around what you need to know when looking for the right therapist. Now, we've spoken a lot about psychoanalysis because obviously she's a psychoanalyst and I have my own experience of psychoanalysis. However, that's not the only therapy that's available in Australia. We know that the majority of people will be in therapy with a psychologist because this is what the government subsidises. And we've also given some tips around things you ought to know and ought to ask any therapist you come in contact with. And that is what your qualifications are, what modality of therapy you treat, what illnesses you treat, are you able to have more therapy than 12 sessions? What psychoanalysis does in Australia? So there's...
Have they had their own therapy?
Have they had their own therapy? Because that's so important to your therapeutic relationship with them so that they're not projecting or transferring onto you their own stuff.
This is good advice.
We covered a lot of ground.
Now, the therapeutic relationship is not like any other relationship that people have. It's a relationship that isn't about that other person.
Right.
It's about you, although they are present and in a very real human way.
Yes, yes.
And that sounds...
And that's the containment. That's the containment.
And it has to be, because it's authentic.
Yes.
And people find it hard to fathom it, but that's the nature of what is a therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
So that in that, you then find a way to you.
Yes.
To yourself.
And in that... I mean, I've always been a very compassionate person. I've always been that. But in that, I can understand the human condition so much more, and I understand the human psyche so much more. And I have, in understanding yourself, you understand other people.
That's correct. And
you can help in your, even though I'm trained in therapy as a psychotherapist as well, but I feel that, in coaching and developing, I can be an advocate for someone else. I can help them move through challenges, not the psychoanalytic challenges that we spoke about, but definitely through something that a challenge that they might have. They might be transitioning from one career to the next. Yeah. They might be wondering why they can't break a certain habit, but I can be an advocate for them in that way, and a champion for them in that way.
I think there's something about coaching and mentoring that people really do need. And like people say a lot, well, how do I do that? How do I get out of my own way to get out of the house to go and have exercise, for example, or to socialize more, or because they're tempted. Well, this is a very recent conversation I had with somebody, and they're saying, oh, but I can't be bothered, and then something else comes up and I can't do it. But what would it take for you to do that? A mentor or a coach would make them accountable.
Yes.
So that they actually go over it. And when people start to get the good juice of life, they are more motivated.
Of course.
Because you can't, it's very hard to fake it till you make it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
well, I don't believe you can fake it till you make it.
Well,
I believe you're either there and you have integrity and you're walking the walk and talking the talk, or you're not.
Well, for some people, it's like they have the intention of wanting to be there, but they just can't quite make it. And they still want that, but they're in that limbo.
Right.
And that's where it would be helpful for limbo people.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Definitely.
And that's what I've, decided and wanted to give as my, knowledge, experience, all of that, in a way of giving back, because, I just see that we need to get back to the essence of who we are. We need to get back to that community and connecting. I mean, people often feel depressed and because they feel lonely, they feel isolated, they feel by themselves, and letting them know that they're not alone,
Do you know, statistically, we've got in the world the highest number of single households in the world now.
I believe
than any other time in history.
I believe that. Yeah.
I think it's because people can afford it, and people are choosing to get away from all the others who they find difficult, and choice because they like it.
Yeah. And choices. Look, it's always going to be your choice, and you can make a choice to move away from a very difficult situation. But I feel like if you're incapable of having interpersonal relationships, that's a different totally different thing.
And then you're talking about living alone is like a hermit,
Yeah.
withdrawing.
Yeah.
Like that, which is what happened through COVID.
Yeah. But I think, what else? Other therapies. There's psychology, there's psychoanalysis, there's psychiatry. So let's go back to psychiatry. Psychiatry obviously is the one modality where doctors can prescribe medication. And obviously it's through the lens of diagnostic. That's psychiatry.
That's correct.
Yeah. So you'll go to a psychiatrist if you get referred by your GP, and they will literally open the DSM. And we all have the DSM.
And that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders.
Yeah, they will diagnose based on your symptoms and they will medicate you. I think I've only come across
somebody who's more cautious.
I've only
trust the more cautious psychiatrist.
I've only come across one psychiatrist who was a psychoanalyst as well, and he's in Milan. He's in Italy.
It's strong in Italy.
And he works in a psychiatric hospital.
Okay.
And I had a question to him very early on. I wrote this article about, is it possible, someone with schizophrenia when they're showing symptoms early on to give them psychoanalysis and kind of halt the process, so to speak, or kind of what's the word for it? Stop them from becoming more symptomatic. And look, he was very reluctant. Obviously, he was looking at it through the lens of psychiatry, saying that generally they wouldn't show symptoms until they're in their teens, early 20s.
It can halt it.
I think so too.
It can in the ideal circumstances.
Yeah, I think so too.
At least because it doesn't mean the person is less psychotic. It just means they can manage.
They can manage
psychotic better.
Yeah, they manage the symptoms.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand.
Much better. And they have maybe a more firm grip on the world, so that when things start to disintegrate, they can hold it still. Maybe that.
There is, she's a psychiatrist. She has schizophrenia.
Her name is?
You know who I'm talking about.
Yes, Sachs.
Yes.
Ellen Sachs.
Yes.
Fabulous.
The Centre Cannot Hold is her book. Yes, and I was doing some research on her as well when I was doing this article, and she's a perfect example of that. So she's a psychiatrist as well as, I think she's a psychoanalyst as well.
But not practicing.
Not practicing, but she has schizophrenia, and she always says that the centre that holds her is her psychoanalytic therapy when she's about to become symptomatic.
But it's a little bit like sometimes for her, the psychoanalyst was hold her because the psychoanalysts themselves became the knot, not the process, not the therapy itself.
It anchored her.
And then she could transfer to a new one when the other one died or retired.
Yes.
But it was somehow in her process, her belief system was around the saviour, psychoanalysis, and the psychoanalyst.
She speaks so highly.
And that worked really. And she teaches.
Yeah, I know. She lectures.
Yeah.
I was fascinated.
She's quite articulate too, but she can't leave America.
She said that. Yeah.
So she's got these phobic symptoms and things like that. But she's committed to. I think she started taking some medication.
Yes, she did. Yeah.
Because she started to, but not subthreshold. It wasn't. Yeah, it's a perfect example. And see, I've got another book lined up on individual cases for treatment of people with psychotic illnesses, and there's a lot. That's why I thought I'd rather.
But I'm a voraciously curious person, and I like to play devil's advocate around things like that.
Good thing.
Because it's very easy to diagnose someone, I think, in this country and wipe them off and say. Right. Yeah.
Like it's permanent.
Yeah.
Shifting sands.
Yeah. And I feel like we need to move away from the stigma of having a mental illness or having a mental condition. I call it condition because it is transient and you can move through it, depending on what it is. Like you said, with schizophrenia, that's a little bit different. But even with that, Ellen Sachs has
She has.
schizophrenia. And so, you know, I think that the mind, they're doing so many different studies on the mind. And
But what about ADHD, Asperger's,
yes,
autism, adults who are having difficulty in life, whatever, are more and more being diagnosed. So you have to be careful when they say this is the most, the highest amount of diagnosis of autism. I would say, look who's doing the diagnosing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Look who's doing the diagnosing rather than that it's in iron,
yes.
that it's ironclad diagnosis.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I remember looking at people's clinical files. This is in the institution psychiatric facility, and some of them, long-term patients, would have 20 diagnoses over the period of time. It's like they keep on chipping and changing. And depending on the psychiatrist, if you go to see a particular psychiatrist, they'll diagnose you with ADHD for sure, because that's their favorite thing. So people with obsessional symptoms, obsessional thinking, men in particular, they'll be diagnosed with ADHD and given Ritalin. And it's like,
that's
what the?
Crazy.
So there's something going on that makes, you've got to question some of these things. And people go, aha, finally I've got a diagnosis that explains me. Thing is, you're a unique human being. Nothing is going to explain you completely.
Exactly.
Because you're a mystery.
Exactly. And that's the thing with labels, is that I don't know, I often find them to be a hindrance. You know?
Well, and people find it a relief because they think, I can target the treatment.
You've got to be really
disappointing.
Careful. Yeah, I think so. I think it is shifting here. I think it is changing in Australia. But I still think we need to kind of err on the side of caution. And
Always.
Again, like before taking any form of medication, just speak to your therapist, speak to your family, speak to people that you trust. And ultimately, it's your decision. If you feel like you need it to help you move through your therapy, then that's totally your decision.
Or somebody else who's taking it.
Yeah.
If you can find other people who are, well, you will if it's antidepressants, because every second person is taking it, antidepressants.
Yeah, which is a bit concerning as well,
Because they're not actually then doing something else to work out
through
what the problem is.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's why I say it should be done carefully and cautiously in conjunction with therapy. In conjunction.
One of the things, I think is that we don't listen very well. Not to ourselves and to the other people. Professionals as well as in families, whoever. We've always got something else lined up to say rather than truly listening to what somebody is saying. And that's professionals as well. They don't listen.
Well, that's concerning. That's concerning because there's a lot of people out there that need help and they really need to be listened to.
But it's a limitation too in a training, because it's a training. If the training teaches you to really listen as a therapist, well, sometimes that's the gold. There's the gold.
Yes.
Is if you properly listen and even check it out with the person. Are you saying this?
Yes, you're paraphrasing.
Are you saying
I'm
this?
hearing you say this. Yes.
Is that correct?
That opens you up for the space of either them correcting or you,
and down the track.
Yes.
6 months. I remember 6 months ago you said ABC. Remember?
Yes.
But I don't feel like that now. I feel like this.
Yes.
Or I've learned so much more.
Yeah.
So they can add on to the story and they can, in a retroactive way, reinterpret what's gone on for themselves. That's therapy.
But that also lets if you're a client or patient, that when you're listened to, that's one of the most integral things you can do for another human being. It lets them know you're present.
Completely.
And that you respect what they're saying. And you're right, most people will wait for an opportunity to respond, but not actually hear what you're saying. That's really, really important in therapy. But what your kintsugi, let's talk about that, because I love that. Bit different. I love the analogy of that.
Well, once again, it's trying to help people because having doing some work with people in drug and alcohol facility, it's to try. what you get is people who feel that they are a total piece of shit, that they are a terrible, worthless human being. They repeatedly relapse into drugs and alcohol, and that their families don't care about them anymore. They don't have faith in them. It's understandable. And so what I came up with was trying to understand something about the Japanese aesthetics, approaches to understanding people, the philosophy. So philosophy, I think, is a helpful way of understanding who we are, why we're on the planet.
Yes.
There's been wise people been asking questions for centuries and millennia about what it is about humans. Thank God they're there doing that.
Yes.
And but what it is kintsugi is under the umbrella of wabi-sabi, which is that there's beauty in degradation and aging. That's helpful around menopause too.
In degradation and aging.
Yeah, because if you see...
You said I'm ripening. I liked that.
Right. And that's the point. Women ripening, menopause. And it's degradation, meaning that everything, this is terrible to say, rots. And you see a tree and it's old, it's fallen down, it's had a life, and it's got this beautiful arc in it.
I know.
And the way it's shaped.
I know.
And you've got the algae all over it. And it's just exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the idea about wabi-sabi. Now, kintsugi is called golden repair. And golden repair, it's based on this shogun back in the, 14th, 15th century, who had a porcelain cup and it broke, and he sent his servants off to fix it, and they came back with the metal bolts in it. Of course, then the tea all leaked out as well.
Right.
So he says, no, I want you to do a better job. So they did. And they found a particular kind of resin or glue that could hold it together, but it was still ugly. And what they did was they filled the gaps in with gold or silver or platinum. Mostly gold that you see. And so what you'll see in museums, particularly in the Orient, is these cups that have gold through it that make it look like a bit of a waterfall feature or anything. They're quite beautiful. And they're stronger once they've had the repair, and they're valued. They're really, really expensive to buy now. And what the idea is, the metaphor is something that's fragmented or broken can come back together in a way that's far more valuable than it was. Now, I believe that not only to do with people in the drug and alcohol facility, but everybody, whether they feel broken, fallen apart, disenfranchised, feeling that nothing can ever come together again, there's wisdom that comes from the suffering.
Absolutely.
And the wisdom is then in that notion of the kintsugi, of coming together in a way that's really solid. People who have been there know and done the work, they know, they have a knowledge, a knowing that other people don't have, because they haven't done the work. They haven't done the work of holding it together. But it is gold.
I definitely think so. I read something probably a few days ago, actually. It was about why is it that when a tree grows, we say it's growing, but we grow older and we say we're old. You know, it's growing. The tree's growing. You know, it's blossoming, it's blooming, it's growing, regardless of how old it might be.
That's right. And it's also a tree. It gets to be an elder statesman in the forest. And it shades the others, and its firm foundations, all its the microbes in the soil feed the others. That it's anchored. All these things, which is another thing about the wisdom of our elders. It gets respected.
Well, it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, "Your thoughts create your words create your values create your habits create your destiny." And then Lao Tzu, who took that on and said that pretty much the same thing, the same thing, that everything is intrinsically connected. Everything's connected.
Yes.
Everything.
Yes.
And so, this is the point of my doing the podcast, is that we can't just look at an individual, if your leg's hurting you, just look at your leg. How did you get the injury? What's going on? Why isn't it healing? Everything. It's not just your leg not healing. There's something else going on,
Bigger story.
There's a bigger story. And the bigger story comes from your humanity, comes from you as...
The thing is, it's like 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
I think it's even less than that. The notion is that there's 6 degrees of separation to us and anybody else in the world.
Mm.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
If you go back with our DNA, because I know this because of Ancestry.com, and they've got this facility that they can trace every human being back to an ancestor. So I can be related to all kinds of the Queen, for example. Well, she's dead now, but
yeah.
the Queen. And so what they said was you're related to how, because there's these 6 degrees of separation.
Yes.
So we can.
Yes.
And that's the thing as well. What you talk about with your podcast, it's for everybody. That's the point. 6 degrees of separation. There's, it's applicable to.
I was finding that humanity in everyone. You know, there's so much. If you focus your attention on the ill in the world, it separates us. And I want to focus on the unifying force. You know, that we're all human beings. We all come from the same race of humanity.
Unifying force.
Yeah, and that's really the most important thing for me. You know, so the existential questions that I have around what can I do so that I make the planet a better place before I move over to the next life are really important for me, you know, and it happens in everything I do. You know what I mean? In every way, in my conscious interactions with people, in my mentoring and coaching, in my podcast, with my children, you know, they're kind of like mini me's.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it goes out.
Yes.
See?
Yes.
Everything you touch.
Yes.
That's the idea about. I was speaking to a Buddhist nun once about this exact thing. Paying it forward.
Yes.
There's a movie.
Yes.
But this is the idea is that no matter whoever you touch, with regard to how you live your life and how you speak, it has an impact.
Yes.
And you have to believe it has an impact.
It does.
And it spreads out. They take it further and further and further.
Yes. And anyone that says words don't mean anything is delusional, because words are energy and everything is energy and words have vibrations. Simple. You know, that's the reality of it.
You have an impact.
Well, everybody does.
You have the potential to do a power of good.
Yes. And what are you going to do with that?
Completely.
You know?
And that everybody takes that on. That's the nature of that movie. That's the whole potential of this kid at school. You've seen the film?
I vaguely remember.
The kid, who's in it? Them actors.
Yes.
Actors were in
it.
Yes. Probably good not to focus on the actors. And the kids at school, and the teacher gives them, a project to go out there and do something that will make a difference in the world and see, what you can do. So he decided that he would get 6 people close to him in his life to do life-changing things that they'll promise to do, that they will do it. And that's how the movie unfolds. You see the impact
Sounds lovely.
of those things that he did. And then there's the end result that gets, wait a minute, 6 degrees of separation, this kid affected all these hundreds of people. That kind of stuff.
That's so beautiful.
It gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I have to look into again. Where should they start? Is it Psychology Today Australia? Would that be a good place or basis? Yeah, where should they start looking?
Well,
or is it recommendation?
Yeah. I think people are pretty smart the way they research. I would say go online and research anybody you come across. You will find stuff. People do that to me all the time.
Yes.
And also go to organisations that, like I've mentioned, the Australian Centre for Psychoanalysis, but there's others all over Australia and even here in Melbourne. And those websites will have a section on who are the members of that community and who are trained and and also the training that organisation says ought to happen. Now, having been on a few ethics boards, I'm just saying there are some psychotherapy or counselling or whatever training bodies that do not have a teaching body attached to them. And they don't have, therefore, an ethical backup
Mm.
So I've known that with a number of people who've failed the ethical litmus test, let's say, and the bodies that train them have no ethical backup, and that there's no recourse.
Well, there has to be. I mean, when you're dealing with people with vulnerabilities, there has to be
And so
some
don't
kind
trust
of
those ones.
Yes, yes.
The other one is go to PACFA, Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of
Yes,
Australia,
yes.
because that's another, let's say, kind of accrediting body
Yep.
That will give you information
Mm-hmm.
about, because it's very big. It's got a lot of organisations registered through them. Yeah, go to the APA, the Australian Psychological Association.
Yes, yes. And know that there is, like we said, that the modality of psychoanalysis is the unconscious. So generally speaking, very generally speaking, psychoanalysis is protracted, it's long, it's dealing with trauma. It can take years to see results, but it's not for the faint-hearted. And I say that having gone there myself on that journey. But if you are someone that's experienced a trauma as a child, I would recommend psychoanalysis as the best therapy that you could possibly have, and be prepared to stay in it for a while. And the other thing is, it's not linear. So
I was just about to say this exactly.
Yeah, it's not. I had therapy, psychoanalysis for 20 years non-stop. No, I had therapy, psychoanalysis probably for 6 or 7 years. Then I didn't see my therapist for a while. Then I had a life tragedy happen again and went back. So
that's the usual.
That's the usual, yeah. And your analyst will be there to anchor you and help you through those storms. The other therapies are psychotherapy, which is the more relational model. There is the psychology and CBT, which is the science-based and thought model. And then there's the psychiatrist who does the diagnosing through the DSM and medication. So the most important things, I think, when looking for a therapist are that you kind of take them off the pedestal. They're a human being. You humanize the therapist. You ask them questions like, have you had your own therapy? What modality do you do? Is this going to be how effective, or what's the efficacy around treating me in that context? What else do you think?
So I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
Just keeping most of the details confidential. I was referred somebody who got into really deep trouble with the psychologist who was treating her. There was early trauma and those situations, but this person didn't know what they were doing.
The therapist she was seeing?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And what happened to this poor woman was she became obsessed with the therapist.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, completely obsessed, and to the point of serious discomfort, anxious, miserable, depressed, and almost stalking her.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, wanting to know where she was, like a maternal attachment thing.
Right. But so not a healthy maternal attachment.
It was really disabling for her.
It sounds very distorted, yeah.
Really disabling, and the therapist didn't know what to do, and instead she made it worse by her action, because she didn't know, she wasn't trained in anything like this.
Wow.
So lucky, she went and talked to her own supervisor, who then
asked her to be referred. Yeah.
And then work it through, which over a 12-month period, and which is successful. But it's an example of people who are out of their depth, who do not have the training for, let's say, trauma, like you were mentioning. So it's a salutary tale too, is that we are vulnerable when we're in therapy.
Absolutely. You will come to therapy being vulnerable, and you will most likely, if you're doing the psychoanalytic route, get more vulnerable as the therapy goes on before you get better.
And you will.
Yeah.
You won't stay dependent on them forever.
Yes. You will definitely get through. You will definitely get through it. But yeah, there's a lot to ponder. There's a lot to question. There's a lot to embrace. You know, we are moving and shifting in Australia. I still feel we're very conservative here regarding psychoanalysis. Yeah. Do you think there's a difference in Freudian or Lacanian in the way that you treat? The focus?
Yeah, they're all a little bit different. Like, you'll have the ego psychologists in the United States who say you should focus on the ego of the therapist. The therapist is the model of a healthy person.
Oh, wow.
And
That's so American.
That's very American.
That's so American.
Object relations, which that's in the United Kingdom, and the Lacanian,
which is
I'm
yours.
involved in. But basically, they've got the same roots. It's just how they manifest in the treatment. Once again, I think you could have some ego psychologists who are pretty good who don't do that. So it depends on the person as well. But there's some things that they do, like object relations. I won't go into the details of the differences because it's boring. But I mean, I've been involved with family therapy. There's another one we didn't talk about, family therapy.
Well, that's integral to addiction, family therapies, isn't it?
It should be.
Yeah.
But also any kind of problems with kids or adolescents.
Right.
Family therapy is really helpful because every kid gets a voice in family therapy.
And the family dynamics, the dynamics that happen in families as well.
And they're a prototype for the individual.
Exactly. This is what I say to my daughter all the time, Belinda. I said to her, the model of how you relate to me is what you will take in your relationships, which is why I kind of push back on her because she's very introverted and she's learnt to really express herself more in a way that she feels very empowered. And I said, that's why I push back on you, because I want you to do that. You have to do that. Because in your silence, that still communicates something to people. When you're silent, that's still allowing certain behaviours. So you need to be articulate sometimes.
She's also not
directional.
Processing something in herself. It can stay lodged.
Yes. And
not for sure. But
no, but this is why, I just think she's amazing. But she's really, really grown in the way that she communicates. And I said to her, the way that you speak with me and how we resolve through challenges is the way that you'll be able to resolve conflict in your own relationships, which is important, So, and that all starts from family dynamics. But is there any reason why you wanted to focus on addictions specifically, or you moved into that area?
Well, my brother died from...
That's right, yes.
And also it just happens to be located in the area where I now live. It was like a few things happened. And plus I hadn't really worked with addictions before. And I thought, that could be interesting.
Are you finding that?
No. Not really. I think that it's the most difficult field because people have a hard time engaging in the transference because their drug of choice takes priority over the transference, and that's a problem. You know, you've got to hang in there a long time. It can be quite disappointing, especially for families with people who are repeat relapses. And alcohol is 15% of the world. The United Nations says that 15% of the world's mortality rate is attributable to alcohol.
Oh, goodness.
See? And also probably smoking is up there too.
You're finding that that's the drug of choice, alcohol, over other drugs?
Has the biggest impact.
Right.
If you look at the graph, it's like alcohol's up here and drugs and all the others are down here.
Right.
But you're getting a lot of treatment for ice and these kinds of things in facilities. They're coming for treatment more so than the alcoholics won't because they can, preserve a life around alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, it's legal. It's the illegality of the other drugs that gets them treatment, ironically. But once again, it's hard for people. It's working in groups with people in drug and alcohol facility. They're the most open. I suppose they've been trained by AA and NA, but they're the most open group to work with. I've worked in groups with psychiatry, and patients are like a bit withdrawn, not willing. They're willing.
Yeah.
But the relapse rate is so high.
Wow.
And it's terrible. And there's not enough government funding. I mean, way not enough. And it's got huge, devastating effects. And they're recalcitrant. People keep reoffending.
I know.
So what do you do with that? Yeah. it's hard. So I don't mind a challenge.
But that's a big challenge.
It's a big challenge.
That's a big challenge. I mean, if they're not, because if they're not willing to participate, then you wouldn't see the rewards, the benefits.
I think there's come across some people who can actually hang in there, and who have found a way. Yeah, but
that's a shame.
It's
a shame.
It's something like, isn't it 80-90% relapse rates?
Oh, wow.
It's not very good statistics for drugs and alcohol.
No.
Treatment.
Oh, wow.
You've got to do better at researching it.
I know. Well, there's ample information for you to ponder on. Thank you so much, Belinda, for joining me again.
You're welcome.
We look forward to our next episode of Food for Therapy podcast. I hope that this is enough information for you to start on your journey of finding the right therapist. You do the background, you do the search, you do the research, and always recommendation is always the best thing. Until next time, I'm Marie-Therese Bolden, signing off for Food for Therapy. Thanks, Belinda.
You're welcome.